Hello, my name is Cynthia Alice Anderson, and I'm the owner and founder of the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. We are now completing 3 years of being on the air, and I wanted to personally thank you for all of your support. As a listener, as you share the podcast on your social media pages, and for your financial support. We would not be where we are today without this amazing support, which is in over 80 countries and 150,000 downloads worldwide. So I thank you, dear friend. I'm grateful we get to walk this journey together, and I cannot wait to see what we're able to do in another 3 years. Thank you again, dear friend, and blessings on the journey.
Supportek Staffing presents The Authentic Spiritual Journey, a weekly show featuring real and practical spiritual conversations from diverse perspectives here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Today, episode 166, special guest, John TwoHawks. And now your host, Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson.
Hello and welcome to The Authentic Spiritual Journey. My name is Cynthia Alice Anderson. I am the host, and I'm here in Circle Studios Records with John TwoHawks. my friend, my hangout buddy on my tour. And friends, it's great to have you with us today. I am in the field. I am in John TwoHawks' studio, Circle Studios Records. We're having a great time together. I've been hanging out with John TwoHawks and his beautiful wife and life partner, Peggy. And friends, I have been spiritually fed, most definitely. So, John, welcome to the show, man.
Oh, it's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure, when we can get together. It's a pleasure to share about our heritage and just life in general. And we've discovered loves we have that have nothing to do with what somebody might consider spiritual, but we've had an awesome time.
Yes, this is true.
And of course, later in the show, friends, John is going to, we're going to have him play for you. Anybody that's knows John TwoHawks knows he's a great storyteller, as well as a Grammy-nominated Native American flute player. So we'll have John share a little bit about his journey, his people, and his music, and even he has a new book out. So John, just tell us, what's been happening for you lately. I know you have a new book coming out, so what's up for you these days?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, as we talked, the pandemic has given us all a lot of time to just sit and kind of recuperate, kind of sit and kind of recenter, recharge. Mm-hmm. And I've done a lot of that over the past year. It's been really nice to sit and not actually have to do anything or be on the road or play music or anything. And it's people are kind of surprised a little when they say, oh, you lots of time. Did you make new music or anything? And really, for the most part, this past year during the pandemic, I haven't touched an instrument. I haven't touched a flute, hardly at all. And it's been actually nice. It's been a nice reprieve. Having said that, just in the last few months, I finally started getting this creative bubbling again. And
yes.
And I really kind of came around to this idea that I've been really wanting to do for some time, and it just felt like the right time to do it. And it's sort of a three-part project. It's the first part of the project is the writing of a book. Mm-hmm. The second part is it will also have an audio book.
Oh, nice.
And then the third part is going to be an actual music album. Mm-hmm. And they're all tied together under the same sort of project title. And the title is Of Mist and Stone. And it is, it's a journey into the mysterious oneness of two ancient cultures. And those two ancient cultures that I'm focused on are the ancient cultures of indigenous people of the Americas and the ancient Celtic cultures, specifically of Ireland. And so, of which I'm proud to carry both lineages. And right. So it's been something that's been an interest of mine personally over many decades. And having been to Ireland numerous times, and of course, having been all over the Americas and spent time with Indigenous people and at sacred places throughout the Americas, I just began to see these really interesting, mysterious synchronicities between the two ancient cultures, and something about it spoke to something deep inside of me. And I think there are answers hidden there for us in our time. And so that's what the whole project is really all about: book, audiobook, and music.
Well, and I'm excited to see it because, as you know, also in my veins is the both the Celtic also and the native. And anybody who's known me long, and certainly upon meeting you, knows how important your heritage is to you. And it is to me as well. I mean, I come from a very large family, and not all of the siblings have been as connected as I have been. But I'm really excited to see your book because I know a lot of people, nearly everybody I know who claims, native blood now, it almost always says, oh, I'm whatever I'm Cherokee and Irish and Scottish, and that's me. And, when people say I'm a mutt, I want to say, no, you're not a mutt. You're beautifully and wonderfully made. And each of those is a really important part of who you are. Right. And so I think you're going to give some really important information and form to these connections so many of us have felt over the years, not knowing exactly why, but there are tremendous connections. I know between, like you say, the Indigenous people of the Americas and our Irish, our Irish heritage.
Absolutely. And I love what you said there about nobody's a mutt.
Yeah.
I have an aversion to the melting pot sort of idea. If you think about a melting pot, it just takes these beautiful sort of colors or, very distinct sort of things. And just the idea behind it is that they just sort of melt into each other and there's no form anymore.
Right.
And that's really not a reality.
No.
People are, I had it said to me a long time ago, when I was struggling with, being a person of mixed ancestry and just trying to, make sense of that. Sometimes I've heard it called having a foot in two worlds, and and there is a struggle with that, and I struggled with that, and I remember it being said to me one time. It was an old Minneconjou grandmother. She said to me, "You are not 1/4 of your grandmother. You are not a quarter grandson to your grandmother."
Right, exactly.
She said, "You are 100% your grandmother's grandson."
Yes.
And she said, "So think of it this way. You are 100% descendant of all of your ancestors."
Beautiful.
And so you are 100% of all those things. And so the way I see it is these facets of ourselves, especially for people who do come from, I have a lot of friends who are, who could probably easily claim that they're, 100% of whatever they are, whether it be Italian or or Lakota, for that example.
Exactly.
So they there are those folks, who have that kind of, incredibly cool and pure, background and lineage. But for those of us who have this diverse background,
which is the most common,
which is incredibly common, it's wonderful to, I think, come to a realization, which is what happened to me, to come to a realization that you are all those things, that you're fully all those things. And I came to that realization. This is an incredible story. And I was in Ireland, and we went to the Aran Islands, which is off the west coast of Ireland, not too far from Galway. These ancient islands that are out there, it's when you arrive at these islands, it's like going back in time. To get there, you have to take a ferry. And so as the story goes in my book, I got on this ferry, and I've always struggled a little bit with motion sickness. And so, of course, the ferry ride left little to be desired. And so I had to hold on for dear life not to lose my lunch on the way out to the islands, and I managed it. But we got there, got my feet on the ground, and walked through a portal into another time. They speak Gaelic there.
Yes.
They're all thatched cottages. Everything moves slower. It's like another world. And so we had this wonderful visit, right? And I was, of course, I had talked with my friend Seamus, who was with us, with Peggy and I on the trip, and I had told him about, the motion sickness and and all that, and glad to be on the island, not looking forward to the ferry trip back. But so we did our exploring on the island, and it was wonderful. And then it came about time to go, and Peggy and Seamus went down by the water because they're water folks, and they were putting their feet in the shore. We were waiting for the ferry, and I heard this tapping sound, and I looked over, and there was this guy standing there in a kilt, and he had a little table, and he was hammering on something with a chisel. And so I walked over to see what he was doing, and he was carving Ogham writing, which is an ancient Celtic, actually a Druid writing.
Yes.
That looks like a tree. It's based on trees. It's got a trunk that goes up the center, and then the letters are formed by branches, and they are read from the bottom up, just like a tree. So I saw him doing these little stone tablets, carving words into them, and I immediately thought, oh my gosh, I want one of my Irish family names in the Gaelic.
Yes.
Carved into Ogham on one of those. And I asked him if he could do it. And he said, I certainly can. So I, of course, one of the names is McGuire in my family. And so McGuire it's an interesting spelling. It's Maguiidr or something like that in the Gaelic.
In the Gaelic, yeah.
I certainly spelled that wrong, so forgive me, any Gaelic-speaking folks who heard that. So I asked him, "Can you do that on this slate?" And he said he could. And then I said, "Well, I'm leaving in a ferry here in 20 minutes. Can you do it in 20 minutes?" And he was like, "I can do it." And he got right after it. So he made this little thing, and it's a little small slate stone, and they had the Gaelic spelling of McGuire in the Ogham on it, and it has a little leather strap, and it's a necklace. Oh, so nice. I put it over my head. I paid him the money, and I ran to the ferry and made it. We got back on the boat, and I got back on, and Seamus and I climbed up to the top, and the ferry took us across the Atlantic again, back to the main island, back to Ireland. And interesting thing happened. I had no motion sickness on the way back. And Seamus said to me, "It's your McGuire ancestors coming through," kind of in jest, But when he said it, something about it rang true to me.
It was like, I felt it too. It's
powerful like about it.
I feel like an eternal, yes, like just resounding from that.
This little stone thing that came through this Ogham, this Druidic writing, that sort of confirmed something in me. When he said that, I thought to myself, he's right. And it was like in that moment I realized, as much as I have always identified, as an Indigenous person, on that boat that day, I felt like a Celt.
Yes.
I felt like a Celt, like I am this. This is me. This is part of me too. And it's 100% a part of me. It's not just a facet. It's in there. It's in the soup.
Yes.
So that was I know it's a long story there, but it was a fascinating sort of coming full circle with an understanding of identity and how deep it goes inside of us, I think.
I think it's a beautiful story. And I think we all kind of have aspects of ourselves, whether it's heritage, whether it's what's happened to us or where we were born, what order we were born in, who our parents were, where there's parts of us that we're not as familiar with, we even maybe have shame about, we haven't fully grown into loving fully. And so what I love about that story, it's like another way for us to do our internal work of learning who we really are. we are so much about, the soul, but the soul is grounded in who our ancestors are.
Yeah.
We have to know who our people are to know who we really are.
Yeah.
And now, mostly we're pretty disconnected. Everybody moves, none of us are in like our homeland of our ancestors.
Right.
And I think there's something very profound to be kind of redeemed in each one of us with doing this work of kind of who our people are and where we come from. I think there's a real sense of connection. I think it brings a huge balance and a beautiful awareness too. And when we know who we are, we have room for who others are. That's what I've noticed.
Yeah.
The more I'm secure in who I am, if somebody's over here maybe having a hard time, well, I might have a little more grace.
Yeah.
If I know who I am.
Exactly. And I think there's hidden, I talked to a guy named Warren Petoskey years ago. His last name is the name of a town in northern Michigan.
Oh,
and there's actually a stone up there that's a fossil that they call the Petoskey stone. Well, that name is...
Oh, I know that stone.
Yes.
It has those little marks.
Those little round little
fossils. I have one of those.
Yes. And that name, Petoskey, is an indigenous name up there. It was his family name, and now it's become a surname. Anyway, I talked to Warren Petoskey one time about this, and he's the one that first introduced me to the idea of DNA memory.
Oh, yes.
And how we have these sort of unresolved sort of places inside of us.
Yes.
These sort of, there's things that we haven't fixed yet.
Mm-hmm.
There's something in our DNA we haven't fixed yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I always felt this disconnect, right, growing up. And, I heard a lot of people say, I felt like I was born in the wrong time, or I felt like I just don't fit where I am. I think a lot of people have those feelings. And I think there's a reason for some of that. For example, when I first traveled back, to when I went to South Dakota as a young guy for the first time, I went back. I often say that when I got out of the car first time and I stepped on that ancestral ground, I felt like I felt like I was stepping in quicksand. I felt like I was sinking into the earth, and like it was the earth and I were one.
We're one.
There was this sensation of being home, of like really being home, to the point where it was emotional. It was a very powerful emotional deal. Well, I have family lineage that is part of the Carlisle Indian School program. They were taken from their family and removed. And that's why I didn't grow up out in South Dakota. That's why I grew up in Michigan.
Right.
And so there was this part of my DNA, I think, that was longing to make the circle back, to get back, right? So there was that. And then I find out that the O'Farrell and McGuire Irish ancestors in my family came to the Americas, not by choice, but came because of the Great Hunger.
Yes.
The so-called potato famine.
I was going to say, yes, most Americans know it as the potato famine.
Right. And so they came here not really wanting to leave Ireland. No, they had to.
Necessity, yes. Survival.
And so there's a part of them that is in me. One of the things I said in my book, I said, what you lost in leaving, I found in returning.
Beautiful.
And that, to me, speaks to all of it. When we find these, for me anyway, it was these ancestors who had been removed from their homeland, removed from their connection to their families and everything, into foreign spaces. And that DNA sort of memory was still alive and still unresolved in me.
Yes.
And so when I made my journey back to these places, it was like coming full circle.
Yes.
I found something that was untied, and I sort of tied it together.
Yes. And, those of you and our listeners who study these things, you may have heard of those called transgenerational complexes.
Hmm.
Yes, and there is a great healing. And as you were speaking, we're here in John's studio, and as you were talking about that, the album cover of yours called Heal popped up. So with that idea, we're going to take you to hear a little more of John TwoHawks and his beautiful music. And we'll be back right after this piece and a few messages from our sponsors.
If you would like more information about the Soul Medicine Retreat happening November 12th through 14th, 2021 with John TwoHawks and Cynthia Alice, be sure to head over to CynthiaAliceAnderson.com. We'll return to the program in just a few moments, but first, we wanted to give a special word of thanks to our podcast partners, Supportek Staffing. Supportek Staffing is an innovative staffing agency built on the principle of caring about employers and employees as they navigate these new workforce and workplace challenges. If you're an employer, they want to be your human resource partner and help with the changes needed during the pandemic. If you're a candidate, they want to become your lifelong career agent to help you grow into your fullest potential. Supportek prioritizes support over volume, integrity over profits, and will treat your business and your career as if it was their own. You can learn more at supportekstaffing.com. That's SUPPORTEK staffing.com. We now return you to this week's episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey with your host, Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson.
Welcome back. We are here in the studio with John TwoHawks today. And boy, I hope I know if you are a regular listener that you're totally digging this, because our listeners are all about growing, about prospering, about evolving. What better way than to know more of who you are and who your ancestors are, to inform your life and your journey. And John, I want to take you back actually a little bit to what we were talking about at the very beginning, which is, people ask you about the pandemic. And I was thinking that before the pandemic even started, you were really guided to stop being on the road as much. And so it's almost like you had a little window into what was going to happen, and it sounds like this has been a good time for you to just rest, Yeah. I'm bringing it up because I think it's easy to look at the pandemic and, talk about all the ways we, can't do this and we can't do that. But there's some really divine thing that I think is meant for us during this time. Mm. And we're not out of it yet. So I wanted to ask you to speak a little bit to your spiritual process, through all of this time, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that, again, first I always like to say that, I recognize that there are people who this pandemic has been, pretty hard on,
of course,
and having, to be isolated and have, all these sort of, things that we've had to do, during this time have been really particularly hard for some people. And I recognize that. And so it's not in any way that I don't understand those things.
Of course.
But just for me and myself personally, this has been a really nice time to just proverbially take the foot off the gas.
Yeah.
To just coast, to just float, and to just not have to feel sort of pushed, or even driven. To be able to sort of stop and listen, which is one of the things that I think our busyness has taken away from us. We don't have time sometimes to just sit, to just listen. And that busyness, that constant movement is, movement's great. There's nothing wrong with movement. I love to work out 6 days a week, and, I love movement. And, if we sit around too much, we stagnate, and
right. That's not good either.
Things go bad. So there's a balance to all that. But we've been moving too much. We've just been doing too much. And, I was reading something the other night, and I heard, I heard this, was reading something about Irish history, and they were talking about a guy who, he just overworked himself to the point where he died.
Yes.
And I think that when we do too much too long, something dies. We lose something in that process. And I think that something is the ability to hear the sort of energy or voice, if you will, of the spirit, of the quiet things that really speak to us the truth of what we're supposed to be doing and why we're here and what our purpose is, and all of that. I think that we lose our ability to hear that voice when we're always making racket. We're always moving around and
so plugged in and
right and all that. So to me, the this year of being sort of forced in a way to not go anywhere, it's for me it's been a great time to just sit and not have to think about anything, not have to, and just to allow the dust to settle. And when the dust settles, you can see clearer. And that's really, it's kind of funny, I was working on an album. I had an idea anyway to do an album. One of my dearest, Hunka relatives, my older brother, my Chie, Chubbs Thunderhawk, he died just not long ago. And I had, and so that was really heavy on me right before the pandemic. And I had some ideas about what I wanted to do musically, and I was, and it involved in some way to honor him. And that is still there. It's still on the back burner right now. But the dust settling over the pandemic clarified for me that it wasn't time yet for that. And so this idea that I had sort of settled.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden then came this new idea. And that's where I got clarity on, this is the time for this.
Yes.
This is the time to talk about this ancient, unbelievably powerful, mysterious connection between these two ancient peoples. And the fact that they understood the cosmic alignment of the stars, and they built these monolithic structures to honor the solstices, and just, the duality and the threads that tie these two together speaks to some ancient knowledge and power that we as human beings have sort of lost touch with because of our sort of busyness and our, really, quite frankly, some of our arrogance. We've gotten to this place where we think, we're so intelligent, we're so advanced. And
we think everything can be Googled,
and we almost in a way look down our noses at the ancients. We use words like primitive and and it's a bit, and so we look at the ancients sometimes through that lens, and really, if we really look at it, I always ask people this: how many of us could walk outside right now in the nighttime and point up at the stars and tell us more than 3, 4 constellations? These people knew hundreds of them. They knew by looking up in the sky where they were in the year. They could tell right where they were by looking up. They knew things we've lost. And so I think and what I've tapped into, I think, in this sort of exploration and this kind of deep dive into these ancient cultures, and is that they had access to something. Something invisible, something that we don't understand today. When you see Stonehenge and you see Newgrange in Ireland, and you see these places where there are these giant stones, 5,000 years old or more. And you think, how did they do that? How did they move that stuff? And we think about, now we're talking about sound vibration, and they're talking about all these different sort of explorations into physics and how things can be manipulated and moved. And you start to tap into something very, very powerful. And I think it's hidden in that are the answers for our times. And that's why I think this clearing for me over the year has brought this into crystal clear view to me. And that's why I decided it was time, to write this book of Mist and Stone and tell these stories with music and with words,
Yes. And I want to reassure our listeners that we'll have links to be able to purchase the book and audiobook. And there was a third thing. There's a book, audiobook.
And the music album.
And the album. So, and friends, what I hope you're taking away, and I'm just reflecting on this myself, one of the reasons that I'm here with John TwoHawks is that I needed time away too. And it's so important that we take time to just listen to the inner voice, to the voice of nature, to the voice of all that is, that comes in and through all these various channels. And if we're busy, we're running, doing, producing, making money. I mean, we have to do some of those things.
Sure.
But there has to be a balance. And what will happen, friends, if you start to make time for this, you're going to have feelings come up. You're going to have grief that comes up. You're going to have joys that come up. But you're going to have also, as John is saying, these beautiful new connections with all that is. And you might find yourself on a journey of discovery, because when you make time, it's like your soul all that is goes, oh yes, we have someone who's listening, who's paying attention. Let's rush in while they've got a break and they're busy and give them some information.
Yeah.
And in my time here, earlier this morning, I was telling John and Peggy, I went down to the Leatherwood, I guess it's called the Leatherwood Creek. Lake Leatherwood Creek, and down in there. And I was going to hike, and I was going to walk, and I was guided to this spot, and all I could do was sit there and release. Mm-hmm. That was it. Just, I had to do my special offerings, and I just needed to cry. I didn't know why. It didn't matter. Yep. I had time. I had space. Yep. And I got up, and it was like, I just felt like pounds had been released from me, like emotionally. Yeah. And the reason is because I made time. That's the only thing. I made time. And so, friends, I hope that you will do this as well, that you will listen to what, we're saying as this is just a part of the journey. I think we forget that there's doing, and then there is to be a rest. Yeah. There is to be a rest. And what's so amazing is that we're so loved by the universe that when we get quiet, it's like we start to open up to new energies, to new awareness, to a new vibrational reality for our lives. Yep. And we begin to awaken to a new aspect of the self. So this is our hope for you. I know collectively I could say that, John has always done his work both emotionally and spiritually, and in his heritage, as you've heard today. And many of you who've known John TwoHawks probably don't know the vast array of recordings and albums that he has available. I didn't realize till this trip, I don't know how I missed this, that he had played on the movie Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, and is Grammy nominated. So we really want to encourage you to check out his music and then also the book. And John, thank you so much. As always, I love you, and Peggy, it's always a pleasure and a blessing to share time. And I thank you for being my tour guides. It's been an honor. We've had a blast. Good stuff. Friends, blessings on the journey, dear friends. And we hope you enjoy this final track from Mr. John TwoHawks. See you next week.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey, presented by Supportek Staffing. This channel is also made possible because of listeners just like you. If you would like to support the channel with your tax-deductible contribution on an ongoing basis or through a one-time gift, head over to experienceofthesoul.com/support. The Authentic Spiritual Journey is copyright 2021 Cynthia Alice Anderson, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission from RR Hot Publishing. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.